I'm Kat Kabira, and today I would love to share with you about joy, happiness, and pleasure. Now, I'm really curious. Do you feel like you can choose to be happy? What's your relationship with pleasure? The other day, I was sharing on Instagram about some sad news that I'd had, and without going into any specifics, just how important it was for me just to allow myself to be sad. And a sweet person that I actually don't know that well at all was like, "You can choose to be happy," and I'm curious. I have some things to say, and I'm curious for you. What do you think about this? Do you believe this? Culturally speaking, there are certain cultures, and I was born in North America, United States, where there's almost like that friendliness, that happiness, that optimism, it's almost like kind of wired into our culture. And I remember a few years ago, I was flying from Zimbabwe back into Europe, and I happened to have a seatmate next to me who was from Scotland. And he said, well, because I'm Scottish, we are ultimately pessimistic. So the choose to be happy or the optimism just isn't really wired into our culture. And for myself, because I've been teaching around the world now for almost 20 years, I'm always fascinated by the cultural imprints, the memories, the beliefs we have around what it means to be a human. And I do personally believe that it is a very United States American thing of like, let's be happy. If we do all these spiritual practices, we're going to be pretty, youthful, attractive, abundant, healthy. And I know for myself, when I first started meditating back in 1997, it was about, how do I meet my pain? I am anorexic. I am suicidal. I'm an alcoholic. Let me take different drugs to escape, anything to not be here. So the motivation was never about, will this make me happy? It was more, can this help me stay? How do I meet this? And underneath that, it was, okay, like, we're born into a mystery, and what is death? What is life? How do I meet this? It had nothing to do about with abundance or staying youthful. And while I'm not saying that like healthcare and taking care of ourselves and making money, that all is essential and something, I'm curious around, is there some pressure that you feel you might have of, if I'm not happy, or if this isn't making me happy, somehow there's something wrong? You can't see this, but I'm actually videoing right on top of my piano. And one of the things I love about music and also painting is that it really is a place where it's like all the textures, all the colors, all the sounds are allowed. It's not like, oh, we only have, we can only play in this range, it's like only these octaves, only this rhythm. It's like, no, if we really allow ourselves to be vibrant, living, creative beings, we're going to play all the things. And how do we start to stretch ourselves to start to feel comfortable in these aspects? If I'm going to go into like a little bit more psychological side, it's like, how do we expand ourselves so that we can integrate the totality of who we are? We are much bigger than this smaller identity that we've constructed. A lot of identity, a lot of personality is a defense construct of how do I ensure safety? How do I ensure love? Anyway, that was like a side note that I could talk about for 2 weeks. But happiness it's just one emotion, and it's fleeting. And sometimes we'll even either try to recreate certain practices. Oh, if I eat these foods, if I do this kind of practice, if I take this drug, if I do this and not that, then somehow I can guarantee a certain feeling. And the pain and the terror in life is that nothing's guaranteed. The one guarantee we have, without suddenly becoming a Debbie Downer, is we're going to die. That's the one guarantee. Like it happens to all of us. And what are we doing right now in this place? So I know for myself personally, there was always a pressure of being a happy girl, a good girl, a sweet girl, a kind girl. And, part of my healing with my eating disorders was, how can I meet all this undercurrent pain, this anger, this deep sadness, this rage? And how can I meet it as a sensation? And the beautiful thing is that when we're suppressing our feelings or not allowing them, they actually almost create like a stagnation in our life force. Like there isn't as much flow happening in the body. So in order to create healthy flow and in order to have more life force, we have to allow ourselves to be ourselves. And you might even know, like, we don't get to choose our feelings. A lot of times it's like, oh, I'm having this feeling. It's not what I want to feel, but I'm feeling it. And instead of trying to manipulate, analyze, or fix it, it's like, can I allow that feeling to start to flow and move through me and see what happens? When I teach like how to strengthen your energy field, or even how to have better boundaries for people who don't have their anger or rage turned on, where they kind of like suppress it, like, oh, I'm not allowed to feel that. That actually will make your energy field not as strong. It's like, oh, I've got like a weaker field, weaker boundaries. I don't have that self-protection. So to me, there is an importance and a necessity to not manipulate ourselves, to not force ourselves to be happy. There is an importance of how do we drop into the more subtle and tender parts of ourselves and make space there. Now, with that said, sometimes there can almost be a danger where it's like we do it too much, and it's like, well, but yeah, we also are allowed to enjoy ourselves. So sometimes there is a time where it's like, okay, like I'm things are really challenging, but I'm not going to let myself just stay in this whirlpool. And that would be more, I guess the big distinction is, when are we overwhelmed and stuck in feeling? That's not a healthy process. That's just being stuck in a whirlpool. Versus when are we grounded and healthily meeting ourselves and letting things flow? So the big distinction is, when are we grounded and when are we not? And so there are times where it's like, you know what? Like things are challenging right now, but I also do get to choose to enjoy myself, or I do get to choose to pull myself out of this. And the key word here is choice. A lot of times we'll feel that we're like a victim of circumstance, and the victim archetype lives in all of us. And where can we start to return to that feeling of power, where it's like, okay, but where are my choices here? What's my movement? What do I actually want right now? Instead of like, oh, I'm just forced to stay in this. What do I actually want right now? I remember around last year at this time, I was in Western Australia for lockdown. And after like kind of a crazy cold, rainy winter, I decided to go take a vacation. And I went up to Broome, Australia, the Kimberleys, totally gorgeous if you haven't been there. And I was so desperate for like a vacation. It had been some tough times. When I showed up there, though, there were a lot of surprises. Like my Airbnb host wasn't able to be in town. She's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't have time to clean the place. Now, if you don't know me, like I really love clean. Like it's my happy. Like I love things that are just clean. I love cleaning. It's just energetically, I love clean. Okay. Like good smells, spatial organization, not too much clutter. This is even too much clutter for me. This isn't my house, just FYI. And so I had to like readjust myself. Like, okay, I've been so looking forward to this vacation. Yes, that bothers me. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't bother me, but I'm not going to let it like overwhelm me. Then like I'm taking the bicycle out to explore the area. And as I'm bicycling, the back wheel just kind of falls off. Um, and luckily like I like caught myself. And so I call her up and I'm like, hey, like back wheel fell off. Like, is there a taxi I can take? Because it was like an hour walk home and it was around 40, 38, 40 degrees Celsius. And she's like, oh no, there's no taxis. You're just gonna have to like park the bike and walk. And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna let this bring me down. Now within that, I actually found two guys walking along and I was like, hey, you're gonna help me fix my bicycle right now because I'm not walking home. So I allowed myself to turn it. Then finally, in this 24-hour period or less than, the fire alarm goes off from 1:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. And again, to this day, they have no idea why it went off. But even then, I was like, I need this vacation. It's been a tough ass year. I'm going to have some fun. And that kind of became my mantra because, I spent about a month in the Kimberleys and working on an Aboriginal community. And I didn't really sleep much for that month. But there was a part of me that was really devoted to my own light and like, I wasn't suppressing or bypassing. I was quite aware of all my feelings, but I was like, I also am not going to let these circumstances bring me down because I really want to be here. So there's a nuance in what I'm speaking of is that when we talk about choosing happiness, you can't suppress your anger or rage, and you really do have to be aware of how you're feeling. And then it's like, okay, and what are we going to do with this? Right. And I'm speaking not just on a mental level, because a lot of these practices that people do, it's always like on a mental field, and you got to work with yourself physically, emotionally, energetically, like that subtle energy that is what is like really alive in your body and affecting you. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I would love things to be a different way, but this is what's here right now. This is how I'm feeling. Can I just allow it? A lot of the stress that we put ourselves under is not allowing life to be doing what it's doing, always wishing it was something different. And then we can even turn it into something worse where we're blaming ourselves, we're blaming someone else, we're blaming the future, we're blaming the past, or we're escaping into future, escaping into past. And, and yes, there's sometimes practical movements we need to make. So by all means, I'm never saying just sit and meditate and just like deal. And if you do enough work on yourself, you'll be able to handle everything. No. But what I'm saying is that sometimes despite your best efforts, there's going to be challenges, right? This is why I love surfing as like the metaphor, because it's like, we can't ever control the ocean. We do get to just notice, how do we take care of ourselves when we're in the ocean? So on a different note, in terms of pleasure, one thing I've noticed in myself and one thing I've noticed in working with other people is it's not so much are we trying to like suppress and force pleasure, but there's actually the other side where it's like, I don't feel like I deserve pleasure. I don't allow myself to have pleasure. And it can actually be really hard when things are going really well to tolerate pleasure. It's almost like a practice of, can I allow this to be here? I remember back when I was in high school and I was in my eating disorder, my dad came in and, just kind of like was walking through the kitchen and just kind of said, I was researching and saw that sometimes people have eating disorders and it really gets strong when things are going really well for them. And I, as a 16-year-old, I was like, yeah, it's true, because things were going great at that moment. I was winning all these awards. I was really popular, la, 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 la. I was fucking miserable inside. And also I didn't know how to handle all that energy, all that attention, but also that success. It felt overwhelming. And that's where like we can even see where we might sabotage ourselves in any various ways, where it's like we're starting to expand in our business. We're starting to expand, do better. And it's like it's like a new vibration that we're like, I don't know how to handle it. And there is a part of ourselves that will go back towards like a more familiar vibration, even if it's not a good one for us. So actually learning how to tolerate pleasure or success is a practice. And for those of us who have had a lot of trauma in our lives, this is one where I'm personally specialized just because, I've had a lot of complex trauma. And so my own work with myself is, how do I stay here on this planet and not let my old trauma and pain and memories constantly interfere with my experience? How do I actually thrive? So the challenge with a nervous system who's had a lot of trauma is that it actually is hard for us to stay. It's hard for us to relax. You might notice, like I can see it in myself, and I notice in the clients I work with, where it's like, our nervous system is kind of always jumping, and it's really hard for us to just kind of rest somewhere. So learning to rest in pleasure is a practice. And it sometimes will require, another counselor, another embodiment practitioner, trauma practitioner, something practitioner who works for you, where you can find a place of rest in your body when you're with them, so that you have that feeling of that anchor spot that you can also kind of remind yourself to go rest in, throughout the day. So practicing rest, it is a practice, because for those of us with a lot of trauma, we're hyper vigilant. So it's like, we don't rest. Are you kidding me? Like, I need to make sure like things are okay. And that's why it's like all the sounds, all the movements, everything can be very disturbing all the time, because it's like, we're always, not fully in ourselves, dropped in. And it's not necessarily our fault. It's like there's been an imprint on the nervous system so early on that it's not safe here. So we're like an ultra, like, tracking guardian, like, gotta watch everything mode. So knowing that you deserve rest and pleasure is an important reclaiming. And so I would bring almost like a new layer of depth to almost that little Instagram, like, you can choose happiness. I do roll my eyes at certain things, just, whatever, I'm going to, where it's like, yeah, and let's not beat ourselves up if you have a hard time really accessing that, because if you have a history of trauma, it may not feel safe to receive pleasure. There might be, I don't really know what that entails, like there might be an agenda there. I might get attacked. It can be, I don't know that I deserve it. Right. So learning that we actually deserve pleasure, not because we've done things or have exceeded or excelled or been successful or giving things, but just by a human being, we really are allowed to be. And so I would say that that's my real invitation. And it's less about like, choose happiness. Suffering's optional. I mean, I do believe that one of our superpowers is, what do we do with what's been done to us? But it's really about, how do we learn to be in life? And that's the real work, because we can't stop the heartbreaks. We can't stop the surprises. We can't stop death. And I don't believe that death is the ending, but we don't get to stop the exit from this body. But we do have the power to receive the beauty that's here. We do have the power to stop turning towards ourselves in attack, and to start turning towards ourselves with love and care. So that's my message to you. I hope you have a very wonderful day. I'll see you soon.